All right, everybody, I want to get us started just because I'm very mindful of time and that you guys are starting this assessment next week. So we'll start with our weekly check-in, and then we're going to think about what we need to do for not only this practice, but also the actual assessment that's coming up next week. So, our little corridor time before we jump into all the material for this coming week. The first is the random question, which is about popular food items that you dislike. I'm going to pick someone out of my jar to answer that question. Gentlemen, you should all have your devices out. Devices out. All right. Jessica, what's a popular food item that you don't like? Huh? Jolly Ranchers? That's fair. I know a lot of you guys do pick out the Jolly Ranchers as their choice, but if you don't like them, that's fair enough, because they are just basically a hard sugar candy. There's nothing really to them. That's fair. All right. Next person is Nahoa. What is your micro goal for this week? What's something you want to accomplish this week? Learning 1 or 2 things in all your subjects. I think that's a great. Excuse me. Thank you. All right. I think that's a great thing to kind of work on, and that way you're kind of spreading your load. All right. Cool. Anything else that anyone wants to share before we move on? No? All right. Cool. Let's talk about our learning journey. So, I should say last week, not last term. To see how the surface area to volume ratio affects the absorption. So you cut those little pink jellies, you put them in some vinegar, and as it absorbed that vinegar, it changed into that colorless color. So we are going to still, gentlemen. So we are going to still work on that practice practical because I want to make sure you guys have a chance to get some feedback on it, because this is basically going to set you guys up for the internal that you are starting next week. Cool. And then here is our weekly fakatoki. So in this case, we have a koi koi te tui, a keti keti te kaka, a kuku te kereru. So the tui squawks, the kaka chatters, and the kereru coos. The other way to think about this is that it takes all kinds of people, and I think that's a great thing to think about, especially when you guys are doing a practical-based assessment and you can do them in pairs. Tupo and Cohen. Second time I've stopped now for you guys. It takes all kinds of people, which I think is a great way to kind of think about things, because you all bring different skill sets to the table, different talents, different weaknesses, but together you guys will be able to accomplish a lot. So today's lesson plan is, there's 2 things I want to talk about. The first thing is I want to give you guys some information about the internal and what we're going to be doing for this lesson, Thursday's lesson, and then how next week's going to go as well. Then I'll give you guys some time to work on your surface area, practice, practical, and that write-up. We're going to move the tables around, because remember, you are supposed to be working in your pair, and then you're working individually for the rest of it. And then lastly, I'll talk about the discussion and what you need in that kind of conclusion section, and anything if you're trying to get up to that narrow excellence level, what we are looking for. So that's the plan for today's lesson. When it comes to the success criteria, there's 2 key things you should be able to do, and that is being able to plan an experiment, which is the requirements number 4 through 8 on the checklist if you want some more detail what planning an experiment requires. And you should also be able to process the results, which is number 9 through 11. Again, if you need some more detail on what processing results look like. So do kind of keep that in mind. All right. So, some information about the internal so you guys are aware of what the plan is. And we are using our time efficiently. So, today I'm going to let you guys have most of this period to work on that surface area to volume ratio, practice practical, and writing it up. Be mindful that that practice is really important because we will be able to give you feedback on it. Any one of you guys move off the table? Please go back. Not us, which one? Or do you want one? No, stop. Nope. Okay. All right. So today, what we're going to be using most of our time for is working on that surface area to volume ratio practice practical. It's really important that you guys get that done so that way I can give you the feedback, because you can use any of that feedback on your actual assessment. Thursday is when I'm going to introduce the details to the internal practical. So on Thursday, what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through the steps and the method of the practical, so that way you guys can see what you are doing on the following Tuesday. So it'll be basically walking through the method. The other thing I will do is I'll talk about some of the data and what you might expect with your trends. And I'm trying to think what else. I think that's mainly what I want to cover. Any leftover time on Thursday you can use to work on that surface area to volume practical. You are also encouraged to work on this one and the other one outside of class, so that way you guys can make sure you get it all completed, especially if you want that merit or excellence. You have to write up those discussions and evaluations, and I want to make sure I give you guys the feedback to it so you know what you need to do to improve on the actual assessment, which you will start on Tuesday. So Tuesday is going to be the day that we set up the experiment. This week? Next week. Week 3, next week. So Tuesdays when you guys will set up the experiment, you're going to take some turnips and you're going to put them into into salt solutions of different concentrations. You will leave them overnight, and then when I see you guys on the Wednesday of that week, you will weigh them and make observations on how that mass has changed. Very similar to the first experiment you guys did, the dialysis bag. So that's why you need to be looking at and referencing those two practice ones to help you out on that. When it comes to this internal, keep in mind that there is a section that you're going to be working on in pairs, and there's a section that you are working on individually. I have talked to the other biology teacher, and I've talked to the HOD just to see if we can give you permission to work on the internal outside of class, and we've decided that is okay. So you can work on these internals outside of class time. You are still obviously expected to work on your internal in the class time as well, but we figured you probably want a little bit more time just to polish it up and really get up to that merit and excellence level for some of you guys. So do keep that in mind. But with that ability to work on it outside of class, be mindful we are making sure that the authenticity of the work is your own. So we are checking to make sure you are the one that is writing this information. You are allowed to ask your friends outside of class for help, ask them for clarifications, but you need to be the one that's writing it on the Google Sheets and the Google Slides. So do keep that in mind, we are checking that. If you are caught copying your friend's work, then both of you guys will be having that section of the internal removed. So let's say you're like, ooh, I don't know how to do this conclusion, what do I do? And then you pull up your conclusion, you're like, oh, just copy my one over. If we notice there are two conclusions that are exactly the same, both students will have that conclusion removed from their assessment, and we will mark it with that missing information, which for a lot of people will be not achieved then. So do keep that in mind. When you are helping each other out, we are looking to see if you understand what's going on. The other thing we can do to make sure that you are completing the work individually is maybe quiz you on your report to make sure you understand the process, make sure you understand how you made your graph and things like that. We can also ask you to complete another graph or to write an additional conclusion to verify that the work is your own. So do kind of keep that in mind. Jacob, do you want to get up your device? Go. All right. Are there any questions regarding what we're doing for the next couple of days? Nope. So we're really going to need to put, pedal to the metal, hit the gas. We got a lot of work to do. All right. So what we will do is I'm going to move on to give you guys some time to work. So what I want us to do to help us stay focused is I want us to break up the group tables and put them as individual tables like this. The two people that are allowed to sit at the table are the people that worked in a pair, because if you haven't finished your planning, you can still work together, finishing up that planning component. If you are done with the planning component, then your pair needs to split up, find a new seat, and you're going to work on the processing with the results section. So you should hopefully you should definitely get the planning section done. You should get most, if not all, of the results section done. Ideally the conclusion as well, so that way you can get as much feedback as possible and you're not rushing on Friday to get work done. Now, to make sure you guys are on track with your assessment, call Mr. Hall or myself over to check your work, so that way we can give you feedback and we can mark it. We will have our computers with us so we can open up your documents and we'll comment on it so that way you have a written copy of what we gave you as feedback. Please do not resolve any of our comments so that way you guys can see them when you do your final internal next week, so that way you know where your mistakes were. All right? So let's break up the tables. Sit with your partner to get the planning done if you haven't finished the planning already. If you have finished the planning, then you can sit separately from your partner. But we need to move the tables. I don't want groups anymore. So move the tables apart. Okay. Cool. I think I've gotten around to basically everyone, and I have looked through your Google Slides and made some notes on it, so you guys had some feedback. I have written down names for people that I haven't had a chance to look at it in class, so I'll look at it after class. But first off, just planning for our Thursday lesson. Before I talk about the discussion stuff, does anybody have any questions about the results section that you'd like me to show you on Thursday to kind of go over? Or anything about the planning section? We good? No questions? You're okay to keep working on it? All right. So there's some things I want to point out about the discussion. The first one is the conclusion. You need this for the achieved, and it does go up to the merit level as well. Now with that conclusion, let me just go to the blank original one. So that one here. What you'll notice in the conclusion for this section is that it is completely blank. And that's because we're not providing that scaffold for you. But to help you guys with that scaffold, remember you can access the previous assessment or previous practice one on the dialysis one. And you can use that to help you scaffold your Google dialysis one. You'll see that the dialysis one, we provided you both an example of an achieved and a merit one. So you can use that to help scaffold you for your surface area 1, which we have no scaffolding for. So do keep that in mind when you guys get to that point. Keep in mind as well that the achieved requirement requires you to talk about your trend and compare it against the class data set. So when you guys do have your averages for your data, make sure you are entering it so that way other people have that class data to look at. So to enter your class average data, on number 5, I've put in the Google Sheets surface area to volume. And that's the class data for you guys to enter it in. Now you can see Ms. Quigley's class here. Our class is over here on the next tab. So make sure you're entering in your average data so that way you have a comparison for the class data. So do keep in mind about that conclusion. The other thing to keep in mind with the conclusion is if you're going for the merit level, we need specifics with the numbers. We also need you to tie it back into your hypothesis. Cool. If you're aiming for a merit, you are writing up the discussion and linking it back to the science ideas. We still have scaffolded it and given you guys some examples of how to do that bit, and that is the merit requirement, and also comparing it against your class data. If you're aiming for the excellence, you only need to do one of the two, which is validity of your method or the reliability of your results. So you can write up either or. We again have some scaffolding to give you guys an example of each one. So validity of method, you're really commenting on your control variables and how those control variables help you in making sure your results are valid. The reliability of the results is explaining things like doing the repeats, removing the outliers, doing an average, that sort of thing, making sure you essentially have sufficient data. So when you write up your evaluation, you can choose one of the two. You don't need to write them both. If you want to give you guys, if you want 2 opportunities to try that excellence level stuff, you can write both of them up. Just be mindful of time, okay? So I highly encourage you guys to keep working on this outside. Just sit and get some work done. You should work on both the practice ones that we've done, the dialysis one and the surface area one. Please comment and tag me and Mr. Hall when you've done some work so we know to look at it and give you guys feedback on it. But do keep working on it because we are basically we're almost done. So next lesson that I see you guys, I'll basically introduce what you're doing for the internal, and then Tuesday you start the internal. So I'm not sure how much time we'll have on Thursday for you guys to work. So do keep working outside of class. All right, that's everything for today.